Let me begin with a confession. I hated my name, not Augustus, that came later, and I'll admit, I grew rather fond of it. The illustrious one has a certain ring to it, doesn't it? No, I mean the name I was saddled with at birth, Gaius Octavius Thurinus. Thurinus, as if my parents had looked upon their newborn son and thought, you know what this child needs? To be reminded for the rest of his life that he was born in the vicinity of a swamp. My father died when I was 4, which was unfortunate, but at least he never lived to see me turn into a politician. My mother, sensible woman, immediately shipped me off to Rome to be raised by my grandmother Julia, who happened to be the sister of a certain Gaius Julius Caesar. You may have heard of him. That connection, as it turned out, was the luckiest accident of my life. It was also, as I would later discover, the most dangerous. I was a sickly child, weak chest, frequent fevers, the sort of boy who spent more time reading than wrestling. My health never really improved. I would spend my entire reign catching colds and hiding from the sun while my generals did all the actual fighting. The gods, it seems, have a sense of humor. They gave me the ambition to conquer the world and the constitution of a damp lettuce leaf. But what I lacked in physical fortitude I made up for in cunning. At 12 years old, I delivered the funeral oration for my grandmother, openly tying myself to Caesar's star. The adults in the audience smiled indulgently at the earnest boy. They had no idea they were watching a cobra learn to stand on its tail. Caesar noticed me. He took me under his wing, taught me the game. I accompanied him in his Spanish triumph at the age of 15, watching as he paraded his victories through the streets of Rome. I remember thinking, that could be me. And then, with the particular arrogance of youth, I can do better. Then came the Ides of March. I was across the Adriatic, studying in Apollonia, when the news arrived. Caesar was dead. Brutus and Cassius and their band of self-righteous murderers had stabbed him 23 times in the Senate floor, convinced they were saving the Republic. I sat alone in my room for an hour, staring at a wall. My mother wrote to me, begging me to stay away from Rome. "It's too dangerous," she said. "You're only 18. They'll kill you too." I wrote back, "Mother, I am going, and I am taking everything." When I arrived in Rome, the city was in chaos. Mark Antony Caesar's old ally had seized control of Caesar's papers and his treasury. He treated me like a nuisance, a pimple on the backside of Roman politics. I was 19 years old. The legal age for holding any public office was 30. Technically, I wasn't even allowed to vote. I raised an army anyway. With what money, you might ask? A fair question. The answer is, I stole it. I borrowed it. I convinced Caesar's veterans to fight for me out of loyalty to his name. I promised them land, riches, revenge. They believed me, because I said it with the straightest face a 19-year-old could muster. Cicero, that magnificent old windbag, thought he could use me as a tool against Antony. He delivered speech after speech in the Senate praising the young Octavian, that noble youth, that pillar of Roman virtue. I let him. I smiled and nodded, and said all the right things. Cicero believed he was grooming a puppet. He was grooming a wolf in sheep's clothing, but he was too busy admiring his own oratory to notice. Antony tried to intimidate me. Once, at a meeting, he simply stared at me in silence for an uncomfortably long time, trying to make me squirm. I stared back. He stared harder. I yawned. He became so frustrated that he ended up just pissing himself off. I have rarely enjoyed a moment more. Eventually necessity made strange bedfellows of us. Antony, Lepidus, and I formed the Second Triumvirate, a legal dictatorship that we justified as restoring order. We then proscribed our enemies. which is a polite way of saying we published death lists and confiscated property. Cicero's name appeared on that list. I allowed it. I regretted it later, but I allowed it. At the time, I told myself it was necessary. That's the great lie of power, isn't it? It's necessary. I've said it so many times I almost believe it. Around 38 BC, I made a terrible mistake. I decided to throw a dinner party. Not just any dinner party. I dressed as Apollo. Yes, the Apollo, god of music, poetry, prophecy. My guests dressed as the other Olympians, and we reclined on couches while being served by slaves dressed as muses. In retrospect, this was not my finest moment. Antony, of course, seized on it immediately. He circulated rumors that I had gone mad with vanity, that I believed myself divine, that I was debauching Roman morals with my Oriental decadence. The irony, given that he was shacked up in Alexandria with Cleopatra, declaring himself the new Dionysus, seems to have escaped him entirely. But I learned my lesson. From that point on, I cultivated modesty. I dressed plainly. I walked the streets without a bodyguard. When senators offered me titles, I refused them publicly, dramatically, with tears in my eyes. No, no, I couldn't possibly. First citizen is enough. Princeps. Just call me Princeps. They ate it up. Speaking of Antony, let me tell you about that fool. We defeated Caesar's assassins at Philippi. We divided the world. He took the east, I took the west. And then he went to Egypt and fell in love, or lust, or whatever you call what happens when a middle-aged Roman general meets a Ptolemaic queen with political ambitions and a talent for dramatic entrances. Cleopatra was not the seductress of legend, or rather, she was, but not in the way people think. Her real seduction was political. She offered Antony the one thing Rome could never give him, a crown. A real crown, with a real throne, in a real kingdom, and Antony, poor deluded man, wanted it badly enough to destroy himself for it. I watched from Rome building my narrative. Every day another story about Antony's excesses, his oriental robes, his Egyptian mistress, his plan to move the capital to Alexandria. Some of it was true, some of it was creatively enhanced. I had a letter carrier, one of the best investments I ever made, who delivered anonymous pamphlets to every senator's doorstep. When Antony formally divorced my sister Octavia, a good woman, a loyal Roman, to marry Cleopatra, the public turned against him. And when I illegally seized his will from the temple of Vesta and read it aloud to the Senate, revealing that he planned to leave Roman territories to Cleopatra's children, the outrage was complete. I declared war not on Antony, but on Cleopatra, the foreign queen, the corrupting influence. Never mind that Antony was the one with the army. The propaganda was all about the woman. The Battle of Actium in 31 BC was almost anticlimactic. My dear Agrippa, best friend, finest general, tragic victim of my daughter, commanded the fleet. Antony's ships were bigger but slower. Cleopatra fled in the middle of the battle, and Antony, like a lovesick puppy, followed her. They both killed themselves the next year, cleaner than they deserved, perhaps. I had their son, Caesarion Julius, Caesar's supposed child, strangled. 2 Caesars are one too many, I told my advisers. I said it lightly, as if I were commenting on the weather. Inside, I felt nothing. That worried me later, but at the time it was simply practical. You cannot build an empire with a rival claimant lurking in the wings. With Antony dead, I was the sole master of Rome. But I had learned from my adoptive father's mistakes. Julius Caesar had called himself dictator for life, flaunted his power, and ended up with 23 stab wounds. I would be different. I restored the Republic in 27 BC. The Senate, properly grateful, properly terrified, gave me control of the most important provinces, the army, the treasury. I called myself princeps, first citizen. I wore a toga like any other senator. I opened my house to visitors. I listened patiently to complaints. But make no mistake, I ruled. I just had the good sense to pretend otherwise. I built. Oh, how I built! Temples, forums, aqueducts, roads. I once boasted, and I stand by it, that I found Rome a city of bricks and left it a city of marble. The quarries at Carrara provided the stone, my architects provided the vision, my treasury provided the funds. The Roman people could walk through their transformed capital and think, look what Augustus has given us. That was the point, of course. Give them beauty, give them bread, give them games, and they will never notice that you've taken their liberty. But I am getting ahead of myself. Or rather, I am avoiding the subject. Julia, my only child, my flesh and blood. The girl I held in my arms the day she was born, when I divorced her mother Scribonia because I had fallen in love with Livia. Julia was just days old. I barely knew her. I handed her off to nurses, to tutors, to the women of my household. I told myself I was preparing her for greatness. I arranged her marriages, first to Marcellus, my nephew, he died young, then to Agrippa, my best friend, he gave her 3 sons and 2 daughters, and then died too, damn him. Then to Tiberius, Livia's son, a marriage so unhappy that Tiberius eventually fled Rome to get away from her. Julia was brilliant, witty, charming. The Roman people loved her, and she was absolutely uncontrollable. The reports reached me gradually. Nocturnal revels in the Forum, adulteries with prominent senators, an affair with Iulus Antonius, Mark Antony's son, of all people. The scandal was public, notorious, impossible to ignore. I wrote to the Senate denouncing her. I called her a disease in my flesh. I banished her to the island of Pandataria, deprived of wine, of male companionship, of every comfort. She sent me letters, begging for forgiveness. I did not answer. I told myself it was for Rome, that an emperor's daughter could not behave so scandalously without damaging the regime, that I had no choice, that discipline was necessary. But at night, alone, I wondered, what if I had been a real father? What if I had raised her myself? What if I had shown her love instead of duty? I will never know. She died of malnutrition on Tiberius's watch, her allowance cut off, her pleas ignored. She is the ghost that haunts my marble city. Enough of that. I promised you humor, and I have been remiss. The truth is, I always appreciated a good joke even when it was at my expense. Once, a man came to Rome who looked so much like me that everyone turned their heads. I had him brought before me and asked, "Tell me, young man, was your mother ever in Rome?" He denied it, of course. I smiled and sent him on his way with a gift. The implication was clear, and we both laughed about it. Another time I dismissed a soldier from the camp. The young man begged, "How can I return home? What will I tell my father?" I replied, "Tell him I displeased you." The look on his face was worth more than any triumph. I also loved wordplay. When a man came to me on behalf of a condemned client, clutching my knees and weeping, I cried out, "Do you think you're giving a penny to an elephant?" He let go immediately, and I suspect he told that story for the rest of his life. I once wrote a tragedy, Ajax, and then erased it completely because I found it unsatisfactory. My friend Varius asked me how my Ajax was doing. "He's fallen on his sponge," I said. The room erupted. My sense of humor was not refined. It inclined to the raucous dwarves, cripples, people with gout. All prompted my celebrated witticisms. I could give as good as I got. and I never minded being the butt of a joke as long as I was allowed to strike back. Perhaps that's the secret of my success. I took power seriously, but I never quite took myself seriously. Laughter is a great leveler. It reminds you, even at the height of your glory, that you are still just a man with bad knees, a weak stomach, and the lingering suspicion that you have played the part rather well. And now I am dying. I can feel it in my bones, the rheumatism that has plagued me for decades, the abscesses on my liver, the weakness in my left leg that makes me limp like an old soldier. I am 75 years old. I have ruled for 41 years. I have outlived almost everyone I ever loved. Last night, I called my friends to my bedside in Nola. I asked for a mirror. They brought one. I studied my face, lined, weathered, but still recognizable. Have I played the part well? I asked them. They didn't know how to respond. So I answered for myself. Since well I've played my part, all clap your hands, and from the stage dismiss me with applause. A Greek comedy ending, 'cause that's what it was, wasn't it? A performance? 41 years of pretending that I was merely first among equals, merely a concerned citizen, merely a man who happened to command every legion in the empire. Livia kissed me. I whispered, "Live mindful of our wedlock, and farewell." Then I closed my eyes and waited for the applause. And I heard it. Faint at first, then louder the cheers of the Roman people, the poets singing my praises, the historians polishing my legacy. I have no doubt that future generations will argue about me. Was I a tyrant or a savior, a reformer or a usurper? Did I save the republic or bury it? I know the answer, but I'm not telling. Let them wonder. Let them debate. Let them dig through my res gestae, that marble record of my deeds, and decide for themselves. I have played my part. The curtain falls. The theater empties. One last thing. If you ever visit Rome, look up. See the marble. That was me. And if you see a faint young man with a limp and a wicked sense of humor walking the streets, staring at his temples with a mixture of pride and terror, that's me too. The first citizen, the boy who wanted everything and got it. Plaudite, amici, commoedia, finita est.